Sister Beatrice spoke last, her quiet voice carrying the weight of careful consideration. The warming techniques we've developed will be crucial if the cold arrives early. We'll need to begin preparing the insulation materials and teaching the advanced heating methods to community members much sooner than anticipated. As the 5 women discussed the challenges ahead, the morning sun climbed higher, gradually warming the stone walls of the sanctuary and casting longer shadows across the herb gardens. The peaceful rhythm of their conversation, punctuated by thoughtful pauses and gentle murmurs of agreement, created an atmosphere of calm, determination that had sustained the healing sisters through many previous challenges. Sister Meredith felt a familiar sense of gratitude for the wisdom and dedication of her companions. Each of these women had chosen to devote her life to serving others, and each had developed expertise that was essential for their community's survival. Their combined knowledge represented decades of careful observation, patient experimentation, and practical experience that could not be found in any book or learned in any formal school. We'll need to send messengers to all the villages today, Sister Meredith decided. The community leaders must understand what we're facing so they can begin their own preparations immediately. Sister Catherine can carry word to Millbrook and Westford. Sister Diana can reach Highvale and Thornbridge. Sister Rebecca knows the path to Oakenhard and can warn them as well. The plan that began to take shape during that morning conversation would set in motion a remarkable demonstration of community cooperation and innovative survival techniques. The healing sisters had spent years developing methods that went far beyond traditional medicine to encompass every aspect of winter survival in their challenging mountain environment. Their approach was based on several key principles that had evolved through decades of practical experience. First, they understood that survival in harsh conditions depended more on community cooperation than individual resources. Second, they had learned that prevention was always more effective than treatment when it came to winter-related problems. Third, they had discovered that innovation and adaptation were essential for dealing with conditions that changed from year to year. Most importantly, they had recognized that knowledge and skills were only valuable if they could be effectively shared with those who needed them. The healing sisters had developed sophisticated systems for teaching survival techniques to community members, ensuring that their expertise could benefit entire populations, rather than just those who lived within the sanctuary walls. As the morning meeting drew to a close, each sister began mentally organizing the tasks that lay ahead. There would be herbs to harvest and preserve, food to prepare and store, warming materials to create and distribute, community networks to organize and coordinate, and dozens of other essential preparations to complete in the few weeks before harsh weather arrived. But first, they would gather the younger sisters and novices to explain the situation and begin the intensive training period that would be necessary to accomplish everything in the shortened time frame they faced. The survival of hundreds of people throughout the mountain valleys would depend on how well they could implement their accumulated wisdom during the crucial weeks ahead. Sister Meredith remained at the window for a few moments after the others had departed to begin their preparations. The morning frost was already beginning to melt under the strengthening sun, but she knew this was only a gentle preview of the harsh conditions that would soon grip the mountains. The beauty of the autumn landscape, with its golden leaves and peaceful valleys, masked the deadly serious challenges that winter would bring. In the distance, she could see small figures moving about the village of Millbrook, going about their daily activities with no awareness of the difficulties that lay ahead. Farmers were working in their fields, completing the harvest. Children were playing in the village square. Merchants were loading carts of what might be their last trading trips before the winter isolation began. Soon, all of these peaceful activities would be replaced by the intense focus on survival that marked life in the mountains during harsh winter months. Families would retreat to their homes and rely on stored food and fuel to sustain them through months of cold and darkness. Communities would depend on the networks of mutual aid and resource sharing that the Healing Sisters helped organize and maintain. The sanctuary itself would become a center of activity as people sought medical treatment, supplies, and advice for dealing with winter conditions. The sisters would be called upon to use every technique they had developed, every skill they had mastered, and every innovation they had created to help their communities survive the months ahead. Sister Meredith turned away from the window and began walking toward the main hall where the other sisters and novices would be gathering for their morning prayers and the important announcements that would set their winter preparations in motion. Her soft footsteps echoed gently in the stone corridors, mixing with the distant sounds of chapel bells that marked the rhythm of life in the sanctuary. As she walked, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought the Healing Sisters to this point. From their humble beginnings as a small group of women devoted to caring for the sick, they had evolved into a sophisticated organization that preserved and advanced knowledge, coordinated community resources, and provided leadership during times of crisis. Their success was built on principles that valued practical wisdom over theoretical knowledge, community cooperation over individual achievement, and adaptive innovation over rigid adherence to traditional methods. These principles had enabled them to develop survival techniques that were more effective than anything available to wealthier communities with access to greater resources. The irony was not lost on Sister Meredith that some of their most important innovations had emerged from their marginalized position in medieval society. Because they could not rely on the support of powerful institutions, they had been forced to develop self-sufficient systems that were often more resilient and effective than the official structures that were supposed to provide security and welfare. Their independence had also allowed them to experiment with approaches that challenged conventional thinking about how communities should be organized and how resources should be managed. The collaborative methods they had developed were based on practical necessity rather than social theory, but they had proven remarkably effective at solving complex problems that hierarchical systems struggled to address. Now, as they faced another test of their accumulated wisdom and organizational skills, Sister Meredith felt both the weight of responsibility and the quiet confidence that came from years of successful experience. The Healing Sisters had weathered many previous challenges, and they had learned something valuable from each difficult season they had survived. The techniques they had developed were not just methods for surviving harsh winters. They were approaches to community organization, resource management, and collaborative problem solving that had applications far beyond their immediate survival needs. The knowledge they preserved and the skills they taught had the potential to benefit communities throughout the medieval world, if only those communities were willing to learn from sources they might otherwise overlook or dismiss. As Sister Meredith reached the main hall, she paused for a moment to appreciate the warmth and light that filled the space. Tall windows allowed the morning sun to stream across worn stone floors that had been polished smooth by decades of faithful footsteps. Simple wooden benches provided seating for the sisters during their morning gatherings, and the walls were decorated with woven hangings that added both beauty and insulation to the space. The hall represented everything the Healing Sisters had accomplished during their years in the mountains. It was functional and beautiful, practical and inspiring, a place where ancient wisdom was preserved and new knowledge was created through careful observation and patient experimentation. Most importantly, it was a center of community life where people from throughout the valleys could come for help, guidance, and the kind of support that made survival possible, even under the most challenging conditions. Sister Meredith took her place at the front of the hall and waited as the other sisters and novices gathered for their morning assembly. As she looked out at the faces of the women who had chosen to share this life of service, she felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished together and confident anticipation of what they would achieve in the difficult months ahead. The Healing Sisters were ready to face another winter, armed with decades of accumulated wisdom, tested techniques for survival and community cooperation, and the unshakable determination to protect and serve the communities that depended on their knowledge and skills. The harsh season ahead would test everything they had learned, but it would also provide new opportunities to refine their methods and prove once again that community cooperation and practical wisdom could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Combinations of marked stones can signal resource availability to community members who know how to read them. Sister Eleanor expanded on this theme. We also maintain detailed records of weather patterns, resource cycles, and seasonal timing that help us predict and prepare for changing conditions. Our observations over many years have taught us to recognize the subtle signs that indicate what type of winter to expect and when severe weather is likely to arrive. The seventh survival method Sister Meredith explained was health maintenance, which went far beyond simple medical treatment to encompass every aspect of keeping people healthy during challenging winter conditions. Sister Margaret resumed her position at the front of the hall to detail their advanced health preservation techniques. Preventing illness is always more effective than treating disease. She began, especially during winter months when healing resources may be limited and conditions make recovery more difficult. She opened another container to reveal an assortment of prepared remedies and health maintenance materials. We prepare preventive medicines that strengthen people's resistance to respiratory infections, digestive problems, and other common winter ailments. These preparations are distributed to households throughout the valleys before harsh weather arrives. Sister Agnes contributed her perspective on the nutritional aspects of winter health maintenance. Proper nutrition during cold months requires different foods and preparations than summer eating, she explained. We teach families to prepare warming meals that provide the specific nutrients needed to maintain body heat and energy levels during harsh conditions. The eighth method Sister Meredith described was adaptive problem solving, which enabled communities to respond effectively to unexpected challenges and changing conditions throughout the winter months. Sister Eleanor stepped forward to explain this approach. No matter how carefully we plan, winter always presents unexpected difficulties that require creative solutions, she said. We train community members to think systematically about problems and work together to develop effective responses using available resources. She pointed to examples of tools and materials that had been created to solve specific problems during previous winters. These items may look simple, but each represents a solution that was developed collaboratively to address a challenge that threatened community survival. This wooden scoop was designed to distribute grain more efficiently during food shortages. This woven mat provides insulation that can be quickly moved to wherever it's most needed. Sister Beatrice added her own perspective on adaptive innovation. We encourage people to experiment with different approaches and share successful innovations with neighboring communities. A technique that works well in one household may be adapted to help families throughout the region. The ninth survival method was psychological resilience, which Sister Meredith explained was essential for maintaining community morale and cooperation during the long, dark months of winter isolation. Sister Diana stood to address this crucial aspect of winter survival. As one of the sisters who specialized in providing emotional and spiritual support to community members, she understood how mental health affected every other aspect of survival during harsh conditions. The challenges of winter go far beyond physical hardships, Sister Diana explained. Isolation, darkness, and constant concern about survival can create despair and conflict that destroy the cooperation essential for community survival. We have developed techniques for maintaining hope and unity even during the most difficult periods. She gestured toward a collection of simple musical instruments, games, and craft materials. These items may seem unimportant compared to food and fuel, but they serve essential functions for maintaining mental health during winter months. Shared activities, storytelling traditions, and creative projects provide the emotional support that keeps communities functioning when physical conditions are harsh. Sister Catherine added her own observations about the importance of psychological resilience. We organize regular gatherings where community members can share concerns, celebrate small achievements, and maintain the social connections that make survival challenges bearable. These meetings also provide opportunities to coordinate assistance and share resources based on changing needs. The 10th and final method Sister Meredith explained was leadership distribution, which ensured that communities could continue functioning effectively even when individual leaders became ill or otherwise unable to fulfill their responsibilities. Community survival depends on having capable leadership at all times, Sister Meredith explained, but winter conditions can affect anyone's ability to provide guidance and coordination. We train multiple people in each community to understand and implement all aspects of survival planning and resource management. Sister Eleanor expanded on this theme from her experience coordinating activities throughout the valleys. We ensure that essential knowledge is shared among several trusted individuals in each community so that important tasks can continue even if specific people become unavailable. Every family understands basic preservation techniques. Every neighborhood has multiple people who can organize resource sharing, and every village has several individuals who can coordinate with other communities. Sister Rebecca added her perspective on the practical aspects of distributed leadership. We also rotate responsibilities so that no single person becomes overwhelmed by the burden of making crucial decisions during crisis periods. Leadership duties are shared based on different types of expertise and situational needs. As Sister Meredith concluded her explanation of their 10 survival methods, she paused to allow the gathered sisters and novices to absorb the comprehensive approach they would be implementing during the challenging winter ahead. The morning sun had climbed higher, filling the stone hall with warm light that provided a pleasant contrast to their serious discussion of cold weather survival. These techniques have been developed and refined over decades of practical experience, Sister Meredith said. Each method is important individually, but their real power comes from how they work together as an integrated system that addresses every aspect of community survival during harsh conditions. Sister Margaret rose to address the implementation challenges they would face during the abbreviated preparation period. With only 4 weeks to complete our usual 6 to 8 weeks of preparation, we'll need to work more efficiently than ever before. Every sister and novice will need to take on additional responsibilities, and will need to coordinate more closely with community volunteers. Sister Eleanor outlined the accelerated schedule they would follow for the next month. We'll begin harvesting and preserving herbs immediately, starting with the most delicate varieties that require specific timing. Food preservation work will commence this afternoon, with expanded operations continuing around the clock until we've completed processing all necessary supplies. Sister Agnes described the kitchen modifications that would be needed to support the intensive preservation work. We'll set up additional workspace areas and implement shift schedules that allow preservation activities to continue throughout the day and night. Community volunteers will be trained to assist with basic preparation tasks. Sister Beatrice explained the expanded production schedule for warming materials and insulation items. We'll organize sewing and crafting sessions where community women can work together to produce the quantities of warming items needed for the extended, harsh season we're expecting. Sister Rebecca detailed the building modification work that would need to be completed before cold weather arrived. Teams of volunteers will visit every household in the valleys to implement heating efficiency improvements and shelter modifications. We'll prioritize families with the greatest vulnerability and the least access to heating resources. As the morning assembly drew to a close, Sister Meredith felt a familiar sense of confidence in the capabilities and dedication of the women who surrounded her. The Healing Sisters had faced many previous challenges, and they had learned something valuable from each difficult season they had weathered. Their accumulated wisdom, combined with their commitment to serving others, provided a solid foundation for meeting whatever difficulties the coming winter might bring. The knowledge they preserved and the techniques they had developed represented far more than simple survival strategies. They were approaches to community organization, resource management, and collaborative problem-solving that challenged conventional thinking about how society should function and how challenges should be addressed. Their success was built on principles that valued practical wisdom over theoretical knowledge, community cooperation over individual achievement, and adaptive innovation over rigid adherence to traditional methods. These principles had enabled them to develop survival techniques that were more effective than anything available to wealthier communities with access to greater resources. These early exchanges demonstrated the effectiveness of the collaborative systems the Healing Sisters had developed. Rather than each family struggling independently with shortages or surpluses, community members could balance their resources through the networks that had been established during the preparation period. Sister Margaret found herself implementing the medical response protocols as families throughout the communities faced their first experiences with the warming and health maintenance techniques they had been taught during the autumn preparation period. The early arrival of severe weather meant that people needed to use these systems before they had become entirely comfortable with the new approaches. Several households have sent requests for guidance on preparing the warming tonics correctly. Sister Patricia reported as she returned from delivering medical supplies to nearby families. The techniques are new to many people, and they want to ensure they're implementing them safely and effectively. Sister Margaret organized a system of medical consultation that could function despite the travel restrictions imposed by the severe weather. Using the messaging networks and trained intermediaries, she was able to provide guidance and support to families throughout the region without requiring dangerous travel. During the storm, the building modifications that Sister Rebecca had supervised proved their value immediately as families experienced the difference between their improved homes and the drafty, inefficient structures they had occupied during previous winters. The heating efficiency improvements reduced fuel consumption dramatically while maintaining comfortable living conditions. The Martin household reports that their home remains warm and comfortable, despite using only half the fuel they required. During previous severe weather, Sister Diana announced that she compiled reports from community members. They express amazement at the effectiveness of the simple modifications that were implemented. These success stories provided encouragement and validation for the comprehensive preparation efforts. But the Healing Sisters knew that the real test of their systems would come during the extended difficult conditions that lay ahead, rather than during the initial emergency response. As the first week of severe weather continued, the daily rhythms of winter life began to establish themselves throughout the mountain communities. The collaborative systems that had been created during the autumn preparation period evolved from theoretical plans into practical realities that shaped how people organized their days and managed their resources. Families discovered that the preservation techniques they had learned provided not only adequate nutrition, but also variety and flavor that made winter meals more enjoyable than they had experienced in previous years. The advanced fermentation methods created foods with complex tastes and improved nutritional value that enhanced both physical and psychological well-being. The preserved vegetables retained their colors, textures, and flavors much better than anything we achieved using traditional preservation methods, reported Mrs. Henderson from Millbrook during one of the communication exchanges with the sanctuary. My children, actually prefer some of these preserved foods to the fresh versions we had during summer. The warming textile techniques that Sister Beatrice had taught proved equally successful as families found that their modified clothing and improved insulation systems provided comfort and protection that exceeded their expectations. The layering methods and insulation innovations enable people to remain active and comfortable even during the severest weather conditions. Young children who had been fitted with specially designed cold weather clothing could play outdoors safely, even in harsh conditions, maintaining the physical activity and social interaction that were essential for their development. Adults could continue necessary outdoor work without the exhaustion and health risks that had characterized previous winter seasons. The psychological support systems that Sister Diana had organized became increasingly important as the isolation and darkness of deep winter began to affect community morale. The regular gathering schedules and communication networks provided social contact that prevented the depression and anxiety that could undermine survival efforts. The weekly community meetings continued despite the weather, using the shelter sharing arrangements we established, Sister Catherine reported after visiting several villages. Families rotate hosting duties, and the gatherings provide opportunities for resource coordination, problem solving, and social connection. These social activities also served as informal monitoring systems that enabled community leaders to identify individuals or families who might be struggling with the physical or psychological challenges of winter survival. Early intervention and support could prevent minor difficulties from developing into serious crises. As the second week of continuous severe weather tested the limits of everyone's preparation and patience, the healing sisters began to see evidence that their survival systems were performing even better than they had hoped. Communities that had implemented their techniques comprehensively were not just surviving but actually thriving despite conditions that would have created serious hardship using traditional approaches. The resource-sharing networks enabled families to maintain variety in their food supplies and access to specialized items that no individual household could have stored adequately. The heating efficiency improvements allowed people to remain comfortable while using fuel supplies that lasted longer than anticipated. The warming clothing and insulation systems provided protection that enabled continued activity and productivity despite harsh external conditions. Perhaps most importantly, the collaborative problem-solving approaches enabled communities to address unexpected challenges creatively and effectively as they arose. When the roof of the village meeting hall in Thornbridge was damaged by heavy snow, community members quickly organized repair efforts using materials and techniques that have been shared during the preparation period. The response to the roof emergency demonstrated how well the community cooperation systems are functioning, Sister Rebecca observed after receiving reports of the successful repair. Instead of a crisis that could have left an entire village without a crucial gathering place, the damage became an opportunity for people to work together and strengthen their collaborative relationships. Similar examples of effective community response appeared throughout the region as families and villages faced various challenges that tested their adaptability and resourcefulness. Equipment failures, minor injuries, resource shortages, and weather-related problems were addressed through the networks of mutual support and shared expertise that had been developed during the autumn preparation period. The information sharing systems enabled successful innovations and solutions developed in one community to be quickly transmitted to others who might benefit from them. A new technique for repairing heating equipment developed in Westford was being implemented in other villages within days of its discovery. An improved method for preserving fuel developed by a household in Highvale became standard practice throughout the region almost immediately. Sister Meredith felt deep satisfaction as she observed the success of the comprehensive survival systems the healing sisters had developed and implemented. The collaborative approaches were proving more effective than she had dared hope, enabling communities to not only survive severe conditions, but to maintain health, comfort, and morale that would have been impossible using individual survival strategies. "We are witnessing something remarkable," she reflected during one of the evening meetings with the senior sisters. "These communities are demonstrating that cooperative approaches can provide security and prosperity, even under the most challenging conditions. They are proving that innovation and resilience emerge most readily from collaborative effort rather than individual accumulation." The success of their winter survival systems was providing evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about how societies should organize themselves to address difficulties and ensure the welfare of their members. The mountain communities were creating models of social cooperation that could have applications far beyond their immediate survival needs. As the third week of continuous harsh weather tested the durability of their systems, the Healing Sisters began documenting the innovations and improvements that were emerging from practical experience with their survival techniques. Each community was discovering modifications and enhancements that improved the effectiveness of the basic methods they had been taught. "We are learning as much from implementing these techniques as we did from developing them," Sister Elena observed as she compiled reports from throughout the region. "The communities are becoming laboratories for testing and refining approaches to collaborative survival that could benefit people far beyond our mountain valleys." They worked methodically through each building, using clay mixed with straw to seal gaps around windows and doors, installing simple but effective draft excluders, and creating insulation systems using materials that were readily available in the mountain environment. Each improvement was demonstrated and explained so that household members could maintain and modify the systems as needed. This arrangement of hanging claws creates a smaller, more easily heated space within the larger room, Sister Rebecca demonstrated, showing how heavy woolen panels could be suspended from the ceiling to create intimate warming areas. During the coldest nights, the family can retreat to this insulated space where their body heat and a small fire can maintain comfortable temperatures. The modification work also included improvements to cooking and heating areas that would make fuel burn more efficiently and distribute heat more effectively throughout living spaces. Simple changes to fireplace design and the addition of heat-reflecting surfaces could double the warming benefit of available fuel. As the days passed, the intensity of preparation work created a sense of shared purpose throughout the mountain communities. Families who had never worked closely together found themselves collaborating on preservation projects, sharing resources, and learning techniques that would benefit everyone throughout the challenging winter ahead. The sanctuary became a hub of constant activity as people traveled from distant villages to participate in training sessions, contribute to community preservation efforts, and collect supplies that would sustain them during the months of isolation. The halls that were normally quiet and contemplative now buzzed with conversations, planning meetings, and the organized chaos of large-scale preparation work. Sister Meredith moved throughout the sanctuary and the surrounding communities, coordinating activities, solving problems, and ensuring that no essential task was overlooked in the rush to complete everything before harsh weather arrived. Her presence provided reassurance and guidance that helped maintain focus and morale during the intense preparation period. Remember that our goal is not just survival, but maintaining the health and spirit of our communities throughout the difficult months ahead, she reminded the sisters during their brief evening meetings. Every technique we implement, every system we create, must serve not only practical needs, but also the emotional and social needs that keep communities strong. The information networks that connected the scattered mountain settlements carried constant updates about weather conditions, resource availability, and preparation progress. Messengers traveled daily between villages, ensuring that successful innovations developed in one community could be quickly shared with others who might benefit from them. Sister Catherine had become one of the most reliable messengers, covering long distances on foot through mountain paths that would soon become impassable. Her youth and stamina made her ideally suited for the demanding travel required to maintain communication between widely separated communities. The village of Thornbridge has developed an improved method for preserving meat using mountain herbs, she reported during one evening update. Sister Eleanor, they're requesting someone to visit and learn their technique so we can share it with other communities. These exchanges of knowledge and resources created a web of mutual support that strengthened all the participating communities. Innovations that might have benefited only a single household instead became shared resources that improved survival prospects throughout the entire region. The acceleration of traditional preservation techniques required innovations in timing and methodology that pushed the sisters' expertise to new levels. Sister Margaret found herself developing modified drying procedures that could preserve larger quantities of herbs in shorter time periods without compromising their medicinal potency. We're essentially compressing 3 months of careful herb processing into 3 weeks, she explained to Sister Eleanor as they worked together to design efficient drying systems. This requires understanding not just what works, but why it works, so we can modify our methods without losing effectiveness. Large drying racks filled every available space in the herb processing rooms, and additional drying areas were created in other parts of the sanctuary. The sisters worked in shifts to monitor the drying processes that required specific timing and environmental conditions to succeed. Sister Agnes faced similar challenges in the food preservation work, where normal seasonal rhythms had to be dramatically accelerated without compromising the quality or safety of preserved foods. She developed modified fermentation schedules that reduced processing time while maintaining the beneficial properties that made these preservation methods superior to simple drying or smoking. The fermentation processes are our most valuable preservation techniques, she explained to the village women who were learning these advanced methods, but they require precise timing and conditions. We're teaching you to recognize the signs that indicate when each stage is complete and when to move to the next step in the VUAID step indicate when each stage is complete and when to move to the next step in the VUAID step in the process. The compressed timeline also required innovations in resource allocation and task coordination that challenged traditional approaches to community organization. Sister Eleanor found herself creating new systems for managing materials, scheduling work, and coordinating between different preservation activities. We're learning that efficiency isn't just about working faster, she observed during one of the evening planning meetings. It's about understanding how different activities can support each other and organizing our work so that every action serves multiple purposes. The clothing and textile production efforts led by Sister Beatrice required similar innovations in organization and technique. The normal leisurely pace of handcraft work was replaced by efficient production systems that could create large quantities of warming items without sacrificing the quality that made them effective. We've organized our work so that experienced crafters focus on the technical aspects that require expertise, while newer learners handle the repetitive tasks that can be performed with basic instruction, Sister Beatrice explained. This allows us to maintain quality while dramatically increasing our production speed. The building modification work proved to be one of the most logistically complex aspects of the preparation effort. Sister Rebecca had to coordinate teams of workers, schedule visits to dozens of households, and ensure that all necessary materials were available when and where they were needed. Each household presents different challenges based on the building's construction, the family's resources, and their specific heating needs, she explained to Sister Meredith during one of their daily coordination meetings. We've learned to assess each situation quickly and implement the modifications that will provide the greatest benefit with available time and materials. The psychological aspects of the intensive preparation period required careful attention to maintain morale and cooperation during what could have become an overwhelming and stressful time. Sister Diana organized evening gatherings where community members could share meals, exchange stories, and maintain the social connections that would be essential for psychological survival. During the winter isolation, the work we're doing now is building more than just physical preparations, Sister Diana explained to a gathering of families from several villages. We're creating the bonds of cooperation and mutual support that will sustain us through the difficult months ahead. These social activities also served practical functions by providing opportunities to coordinate work efforts, share innovations, and identify families or individuals who might need additional support during the winter. The gatherings became informal assessment sessions where community leaders could ensure that no one would be forgotten or left without adequate preparation. As the third week of intensive preparation drew to a close, the transformation that had taken place throughout the mountain communities was remarkable. Villages that had seemed vulnerable and isolated now showed evidence of sophisticated survival systems and strong networks of mutual support. Storage areas that had been empty or inadequately stocked now contained carefully organized supplies of preserved foods, warming materials, and essential resources. Homes that had been drafty and difficult to heat now incorporated insulation and heating improvements that would dramatically reduce fuel requirements. Communities that had operated as collections of individual households now functioned as coordinated networks capable of sharing resources and supporting members who faced difficulties. The Healing Sisters had successfully implemented their comprehensive survival system throughout the region, creating a web of preparation and cooperation that would enable hundreds of families to weather the harsh winter with confidence and security. Their accumulated wisdom and innovative techniques had been shared, tested, and refined through the intensive preparation period. Sister Rebecca completed their senior team by reporting on how the building modifications and heating efficiency improvements were performing throughout the extended severe weather period. Her engineering expertise provided crucial insights into which modifications were most effective and how they could be improved for future applications. The heating efficiency improvements are exceeding our projections, Sister Rebecca reported. Families are maintaining comfortable temperatures using 60 to 70% of the fuel they required in previous winters. The building modifications are proving durable and effective, with no significant maintenance issues despite the severe conditions. She described technical innovations that community members had developed to improve upon the basic modifications they have been taught. Several households have created additional improvements that further enhance heating efficiency. We're documenting these innovations so they can be shared with other communities and incorporated into future building modification programs. As the Senior Sisters reviewed the comprehensive success of their winter survival systems, they began to understand that they had achieved something that went far beyond their original goals. They had not just helped communities survive a harsh winter. They had demonstrated alternative approaches to social organization that challenged fundamental assumptions about how human societies should function. What we're observing challenges everything medieval society assumes about the relationship between individual resources and community welfare. Sister Meredith reflected as she considered the broader implications of their success. These communities are achieving better outcomes through cooperation than wealthy individuals can achieve through accumulation. The evidence was undeniable. Communities that had implemented their collaborative survival methods were experiencing better health, nutrition, comfort, and morale than would have been possible using individual survival strategies. even with significantly greater resources. They were proving that social cooperation could be more effective than individual wealth for ensuring human welfare. Sister Margaret added her perspective on the medical implications of their observations. The health outcomes we're documenting suggest that community cooperation isn't just more efficient for resource utilization. It's actually better for human health in fundamental ways that individual approaches cannot achieve. The reduced stress, improved nutrition, better housing conditions, and stronger social support systems were creating health benefits that extended beyond what medical treatment alone could provide. They were demonstrating that prevention through community cooperation was more effective than treatment through individual medical care. Sister Eleanor contributed observations about the economic implications of their success. The resource efficiency we're achieving through community cooperation suggests that collaborative approaches could provide better living standards for entire populations using fewer total resources than competitive individual systems require. Their food preservation and distribution networks were generating surpluses that could support additional community members or provide security reserves for future challenges. The efficiency gains were creating wealth that could be invested in improvements and innovations that would benefit everyone. Sister Agnes reflected on the social and cultural implications of the community cooperation they were observing. The relationships and social bonds that are developing through collaborative survival efforts are creating social capital that will benefit these communities long after winter ends. The trust, communication skills, and cooperative work experience that people were developing would enable them to address other challenges and opportunities more effectively than communities that relied primarily on individual effort and formal authority structures. Sister Beatrice considered the educational and knowledge-sharing implications of their success. The innovation and adaptation we're seeing demonstrates that collaborative learning approaches can generate new knowledge more effectively than individual study or formal instruction. Community members were discovering solutions and improvements through collaborative experimentation that surpassed what any individual could have developed alone. They were proving that knowledge creation could be more effective through cooperative effort than through individual genius or institutional authority. Sister Rebecca added her perspective on the technological and infrastructure implications. The building modifications and heating innovations that are emerging through community cooperation suggest that collaborative approaches can generate technological advancement more rapidly than individual invention. The sharing of ideas, resources, and labor was enabling communities to implement improvements and innovations that individual households could never have achieved independently. They were demonstrating that technological progress could be accelerated through cooperative effort. As their morning discussion continued, the senior sisters began to recognize that their winter survival systems had implications that extended far beyond their immediate mountain communities. They were witnessing the emergence of social and economic principles that could transform how human societies organize themselves to ensure the welfare of all their members. We must document these observations carefully, Sister Meredith decided. The knowledge we're gaining about community cooperation and collaborative survival could benefit people throughout the known world if we can preserve it properly and share it with those who might implement these approaches. The documentation project that began that morning would become one of the most important contributions the Healing Sisters made to human knowledge. Their systematic observations of how collaborative approaches worked in practice provided evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about social organization, economic efficiency, and human nature itself. Sister Margaret took responsibility for documenting the health and medical aspects of their observations. Her records would show that community cooperation produced better health outcomes than individual medical care, that prevention through social support was more effective than treatment through individual intervention, and that psychological well-being was closely linked to community security and mutual aid. Sister Eleanor focused on documenting the economic and resource management aspects of their collaborative systems. Her careful records would demonstrate that resource sharing and community cooperation could provide better living standards for entire populations using fewer total resources than competitive individual approaches required. Sister Agnes documented the social and cultural dimensions of their community cooperation experiments. Her observations would reveal how collaborative survival efforts strengthened social bonds, created lasting relationships, and built social capital that benefited communities long after immediate survival challenges had passed. Sister Beatrice recorded the educational and knowledge-sharing aspects of their collaborative approaches. Her documentation would show how community cooperation accelerated innovation, how collaborative learning generated new knowledge more effectively than individual study, and how sharing principles rather than specific techniques enabled adaptive problem-solving. Sister Rebecca documented the technological and infrastructure innovations that emerged through community cooperation. Her records would demonstrate how collaborative approaches could accelerate technological advancement and enable communities to implement improvements that individual households could never achieve independently. As February brought the deepest cold of winter, the communities throughout the mountain valleys continued to demonstrate the effectiveness of their collaborative survival systems. The harsh conditions that would have created serious hardship using traditional individual approaches became opportunities for people to work together and strengthen their cooperative relationships. Daily routines of winter life had evolved into sophisticated systems that maximize both efficiency and social connection. Morning activities focused on health maintenance and resource monitoring, with families checking on neighbors and coordinating any necessary assistance. Midday brought collaborative work sessions where people worked together on craft projects, equipment maintenance, and food preparation. Evenings were devoted to social activities that maintained morale and provided opportunities for sharing information and planning future activities. These routines created what modern social scientists would recognize as resilient community systems that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining the social cooperation essential for collective welfare. The mountain communities were developing social technologies that were centuries ahead of their time. The success of their winter survival systems began attracting attention from outside their region as word spread about communities that were not just surviving harsh conditions, but actually thriving during what was proving to be one of the most severe winters in living memory. Merchants who passed through the region during brief weather breaks reported that the mountain villages showed none of the desperation and suffering that characterized other areas facing similar conditions. These communities appear to be better nourished, healthier, and more prosperous during this harsh winter than many wealthy towns are during normal seasons, reported Master Thomas, a traveling merchant who had stopped at the sanctuary during a journey between distant markets. Their methods for organizing resources and maintaining welfare deserve study by scholars throughout the realm. Such reports began to attract interest from monastery leaders, royal administrators, and wealthy merchants who wanted to understand how marginal mountain communities could achieve better outcomes than established institutions, with access to far greater resources. The Healing Sisters found themselves receiving visitors who came to learn about their collaborative approaches. However, this attention also brought concerns about how their innovations might be received by authorities who could feel threatened by evidence that alternative social organization could be more effective than established hierarchical systems. Sister Meredith and her colleagues began to consider how they could share their knowledge while protecting the communities that had helped develop and test these approaches. We must be thoughtful about how we present our observations, Sister Meredith counseled during one of their evening planning sessions. The effectiveness of our collaborative approaches could be seen as challenging the legitimacy of existing authority structures. We need to focus on the practical benefits rather than the political implications. The documentation project continued throughout the remainder of the winter, as the sisters carefully recorded every aspect of their collaborative survival systems that could be useful for other communities facing similar challenges. They created detailed descriptions of their techniques, systematic observations of their effectiveness, and comprehensive guides for implementing these approaches in different environments. As March brought the first hints that winter's grip was beginning to loosen, the mountain communities that had embraced the Healing Sisters' collaborative methods found themselves in remarkably good condition. Their survival systems had not only protected them through the harsh season, but had actually strengthened their communities and improved their prospects for the future. Families emerged from winter with better health than they had experienced in years. Community relationships were stronger and more cooperative than ever before. Resource reserves remained adequate despite the extended severe weather. Most importantly, people had developed skills, knowledge, and social bonds that would benefit them throughout the coming year and in future seasons. The success of their winter survival systems provided clear evidence that collaborative approaches could address fundamental human challenges more effectively than individual or hierarchical systems. The mountain communities had demonstrated that cooperation could generate prosperity, that sharing could create abundance, and that community solidarity could provide security that individual accumulation could never achieve. Sister Meredith felt deep satisfaction as she observed the results of their comprehensive survival systems. The Healing Sisters had successfully preserved and advanced knowledge that could benefit human communities throughout the world. They had demonstrated that marginalized communities could develop more effective solutions to complex challenges than established institutions with access to greater resources. Most importantly, they had proven that human societies could organize themselves around principles of cooperation, mutual aid, and shared responsibility in ways that promoted the welfare of all community members. Their winter survival systems represented more than techniques for dealing with harsh weather. They were models for creating more just and effective human societies. As spring slowly returned to the mountain valleys, the communities that had implemented the Healing Sisters' collaborative survival methods began planning how they could apply these same principles to other aspects of their lives throughout the year. The cooperation that had enabled winter survival could also improve agricultural production, craft work, trade relationships, and community development. The knowledge preservation systems they had created would ensure that their innovations and observations would be available for future generations. The educational networks they had established would continue sharing improvements and adaptations as communities refined their collaborative approaches. The social bonds they had strengthened would provide foundations for continued cooperation and mutual support. The Healing Sisters had achieved something remarkable during the winter that tested their accumulated wisdom and organizational skills. They had not only helped communities survive severe conditions, but had demonstrated alternative approaches to social organization that could transform how human societies function to ensure the well-being of all their members. Their success represented proof that innovation and leadership could emerge from unexpected sources when people were given opportunities to collaborate in addressing shared challenges. They had shown that marginalized communities often developed the most creative and effective solutions precisely because they faced the greatest difficulties with the fewest conventional resources. The Winter that had begun with concerns about survival had become a season of discovery and innovation that would influence human social development far beyond the mountain valleys, where these remarkable experiments in community cooperation had taken place. The Healing Sisters had preserved wisdom and developed techniques that would benefit communities throughout the known world for generations to come. As April's gentle warmth began to melt the massive snowdrifts that had defined the mountain landscape for months, the communities throughout the valleys emerged from winter, transformed by their experience with collaborative survival. The harsh season that many had anticipated with dread had instead become a period of discovery, innovation, and community strengthening that exceeded everyone's expectations. Sister Meredith stood in the herb gardens, watching as the first green shoots pushed through the remaining snow to announce spring's return. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the natural world, but in the human communities that surrounded the sanctuary. Villages that had entered winter as collections of individual households had emerged as coordinated networks of mutual support and shared prosperity. Sister Catherine, she called to her young colleague, who was carefully examining the emerging plants to assess which had survived the harsh conditions. Please ask all the senior sisters to join me for our spring assessment. We have much to discuss about what we've learned and how we should proceed. The success of their winter survival systems had created new opportunities and new responsibilities for the Healing Sisters. Communities throughout the region were eager to continue the collaborative approaches that had served them so well during the harsh season. Visitors from distant areas were requesting instruction in their techniques. Most significantly, they had accumulated knowledge and experience that could benefit people far beyond their mountain valleys. Sister Margaret was the first to arrive, carrying her comprehensive records of health outcomes throughout the winter. Her documentation provided clear evidence that collaborative approaches had produced better health results than individual survival strategies, even under the most challenging conditions. The health improvements we observed during winter are continuing into spring, Sister Margaret reported. Communities that maintained collaborative resource sharing and mutual support systems are showing better nutrition, fewer illnesses, and stronger overall health than villages that returned to individual household management when weather conditions improved. She opened her carefully maintained record books to pages filled with systematic observations about health patterns throughout the region. Most significantly, we're seeing evidence that the social cooperation developed during winter survival is providing ongoing psychological benefits that affect physical health in measurable ways. Sister Eleanor joined them, bringing detailed documentation about the economic aspects of their collaborative survival systems. Her systematic approach to resource management had generated valuable data about how community cooperation affected efficiency, productivity, and prosperity. The resource-sharing networks that functioned so effectively during winter are proving equally beneficial for spring activities, Sister Eleanor reported. Communities are applying collaborative approaches to agricultural preparation, craft production, and trade relationships with results that exceed what individual efforts could achieve. She showed them records that demonstrated how cooperative work arrangements were generating productivity gains that benefited entire communities. By pooling labor, sharing equipment, and coordinating planning, villages are accomplishing spring preparation tasks more quickly and effectively than previous years required. Sister Agnes arrived with observations about how the social bonds strengthened during winter cooperation were affecting community relationships and cultural development. Her role in organizing shared activities gave her unique insights into the social dimensions of their collaborative approaches. The relationships and trust networks developed during winter survival are creating social capital that enables communities to address other challenges and opportunities more effectively, Sister Agnes reported. People are working together on projects and initiatives that would never have been possible without the cooperation skills they developed during our survival systems. She described community projects that demonstrated how collaborative skills transferred to other activities. The village of Westford is organizing a cooperative mill construction project that will serve several communities. Thornbridge is coordinating shared agricultural improvements that will benefit the entire valley. These initiatives are possible because people learn to work together effectively during winter. Sister Beatrice contributed her perspectives on how the knowledge-sharing and educational aspects of their collaborative approaches were continuing to generate innovations and improvements. Her expertise in teaching practical skills provided insights into how communities could continue learning and adapting. People are applying the principles we taught about adaptation and innovation to other aspects of their lives, Sister Beatrice reported. They're developing improvements to agricultural techniques, craft methods, and building construction, using the same collaborative problem-solving approaches they learned for winter survival, she described. Examples of creative adaptation that showed how understanding principles enable people to generate solutions for new challenges. The Morrison family has adapted insulation techniques to create better storage facilities for agricultural products. The Garcia household has applied resource sharing principles to organize a community workshop that serves multiple families. Sister Rebecca completed their senior team by reporting on the infrastructure and technological innovations that were emerging from continued community cooperation. Her engineering expertise provided crucial insights into how collaborative approaches could accelerate technological development and infrastructure improvement. Communities are implementing building improvements, agricultural enhancements, and craft innovations at a pace that would be impossible using individual efforts, Sister Rebecca reported. The cooperation skills and resource-sharing networks developed during winter are enabling technological advancement that benefits entire regions. She described infrastructure projects that demonstrated the power of collaborative approaches. Multiple villages are coordinating to improve mountain roads that will benefit trade and communication throughout the valleys. Communities are sharing the costs and labor for water management projects that serve broader areas than any single village could manage. As the senior sisters reviewed the comprehensive success of their collaborative approaches, they began to understand that they had discovered principles of social organization that had applications far beyond winter survival. They had demonstrated that cooperative methods could improve every aspect of community life, from health and economics to technology and culture. What we've learned during this winter represents more than survival techniques, Sister Meredith reflected as she considered the broader implications of their observations. We've discovered approaches to human cooperation that could transform how societies organize themselves to promote the welfare of all their members. The evidence was compelling. Communities that had implemented their collaborative methods were achieving better outcomes in every measurable area compared to villages that relied on traditional individual approaches. They were healthier, more prosperous, more innovative, and more resilient in facing both challenges and opportunities. Sister Margaret added her perspective on the broader implications of their health observations. The health benefits of community cooperation suggest that social organization affects human well-being in fundamental ways that individual medical care cannot address. We've demonstrated that prevention through community support is more effective than treatment through individual intervention. The reduced stress, improved nutrition, better housing conditions, and stronger social networks were creating health outcomes that challenged conventional understanding of the relationship between medical care and human welfare. They were proving that social conditions were more important than individual treatment for maintaining health. Sister Eleanor contributed observations about the economic implications of their success. the efficiency gains and productivity improvements we've documented suggest that collaborative approaches could provide better living standards for entire populations while using fewer total resources than competitive individual systems require. Their resource-sharing networks and cooperative work arrangements were generating wealth and security that exceeded what individual accumulation strategies could achieve. They were demonstrating that cooperation could be more economically efficient than competition for creating prosperity. Sister Agnes reflected on the social and cultural implications of their community cooperation experiments. The trust networks and social bonds that developed through collaborative survival efforts are creating social capital that enables communities to address complex challenges more effectively than formal authority structures can. Manage the cooperative relationships and communication skills that people had developed were proving valuable for every aspect of community life. They were showing that social cooperation could provide more effective governance than hierarchical authority systems. Sister Beatrice considered the educational and knowledge development implications of their collaborative approaches. The innovation and adaptation we've observed demonstrates that cooperative learning and shared problem-solving can generate new knowledge more effectively than individual study or formal instruction. Community members were discovering solutions and improvements through collaborative experimentation that surpassed what isolated individuals or formal institutions could develop. They were proving that knowledge creation could be accelerated through cooperative effort. Sister Rebecca added her perspective on the technological and infrastructure implications. The construction projects and technical innovations emerging through community cooperation suggest that collaborative approaches can accelerate technological advancement more rapidly than individual invention or institutional research. The sharing of ideas, resources, and labor was enabling communities to implement improvements and innovations that individual efforts could never have achieved. They were demonstrating that technological progress could be enhanced through cooperative development. As their spring assessment continued, the senior sisters began to recognize that their winter survival systems had revealed principles of human organization that could address fundamental challenges facing all human societies. They had discovered approaches to cooperation that could improve health, increase prosperity, accelerate innovation, and strengthen communities in ways that individual or hierarchical systems could not achieve. We have a responsibility to share this knowledge with other communities that could benefit from these approaches, Sister Meredith decided. But we must also be thoughtful about how we present our observations to ensure they're understood correctly and implemented effectively. The documentation and dissemination project that began that spring morning would become one of the most important contributions the Healing Sisters made to human knowledge. Their systematic observations of collaborative survival and community cooperation provided evidence and practical guidance that could benefit societies throughout the known world. Sister Margaret took responsibility for documenting the health and medical aspects of their observations in forms that physicians and healers throughout the region could understand and implement. Her work would demonstrate how community cooperation could improve health outcomes more effectively than individual medical treatment. Sister Eleanor focused on creating practical guides for implementing resource sharing and cooperative economic arrangements that could benefit communities facing various types of challenges. Her documentation would show how collaborative approaches could provide better economic outcomes than competitive individual systems. Sister Agnes developed materials that explained how to build and maintain the social cooperation networks that made collaborative survival possible. Her work would provide guidance for creating the trust and communication systems essential for community cooperation. Sister Beatrice created educational materials that taught the principles behind their survival techniques rather than just specific methods, enabling people to adapt these approaches to different environments and challenges. Our work would help communities develop their own innovations based on collaborative problem-solving principles. Sister Rebecca produced technical guides for implementing the infrastructure and building improvements that supported community cooperation and collaborative survival. Our documentation would enable communities to create the physical foundations necessary for effective cooperative systems. Sister Meredith felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she observed the results of their efforts. The collaboration between the sanctuary and the surrounding communities had created something remarkable, a survival network that was stronger and more comprehensive than anything any individual community could have achieved alone. We have demonstrated once again that communities can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together with shared purpose and mutual support, she reflected during the final planning meeting before the anticipated arrival of harsh weather. The techniques we have implemented will not only help us survive the winter ahead, but will provide a foundation for continued cooperation and innovation in future seasons. The knowledge preservation and sharing systems they had created would ensure that the innovations developed during this intensive preparation period would not be lost, but would become part of the accumulated wisdom available for future challenges. Each successful technique would be documented, taught, and refined through practical application. The community networks they had established would continue to function throughout the winter, providing ongoing opportunities for resource sharing, mutual support, and collaborative problem-solving as new challenges arose. The social bonds created during the preparation period would help maintain morale and cooperation during the long months of isolation. Most importantly, they had proven once again that marginalized communities could develop more effective solutions to complex survival challenges than wealthier communities, with access to greater individual resources. Their success was built on principles of cooperation, innovation, and shared responsibility that challenged conventional assumptions about how society should organize themselves to address difficulties. As the final preparations were completed and the first signs of approaching severe weather appeared on the horizon, the Healing Sisters and their community partners were ready to face whatever challenges the winter might bring. Their comprehensive survival system was in place, their resource networks were functioning, and their collaborative relationships were strong enough to sustain them through the months of testing that lay ahead. First major snowfall arrived 3 days earlier than Sister Meredith's most pessimistic predictions, beginning during the dark hours before dawn on a November morning when the mountain valleys were still wrapped in the deep quiet that preceded winter's grip. Sister Catherine was among the first to notice the change, awakening in her simple cell to the peculiar muffled silence that snow brings to the world. She rose quietly from her narrow bed and moved to the small window that looked out over the herb gardens toward the valley below. What she saw confirmed the gravity of Sister Meredith's weather predictions. Snow was falling steadily, thick flakes that caught the light from the sanctuary's windows and created dancing patterns against the darkness. Already, the garden paths were disappearing under a white blanket that showed no sign of thinning. "Sister Meredith," she called softly as she hurried through the corridors toward the senior sister's quarters. "The snow has begun, and it appears to be falling very heavily." Sister Meredith was already awake, having been roused by the same subtle changes in the air that had awakened her young colleague. She had spent 43 years in these mountains, and her experienced senses could detect the approach of significant weather long before visual signs appeared. The pressure changes, the quality of the wind, and the behavior of the sanctuary's animals had all indicated that the severe weather was imminent. Gather Sisters Margaret, Elena, Agnes, and Beatrice. Sister Meredith instructed as she began dressing in the warm woolen robes that would be essential for the months ahead. We must assess our preparations and begin implementing the early winter protocols immediately. Within an hour, the senior sisters had assembled in the main hall to review their readiness for the harsh season that was announcing itself with such dramatic emphasis. The snow continued to fall outside the tall windows, creating a sense of isolation that marked the beginning of the mountain community's annual retreat from the outside world. Our preparations are as complete as we could make them in the time available, Sister Eleanor reported as she reviewed the carefully maintained lists that tracked every aspect of their winter supplies. Food stores are adequate for the extended season we anticipated, with sufficient surplus to assist community members who face shortages. Sister Margaret added her assessment of the medical and warming supplies they had prepared. Herb stocks are comprehensive, including adequate quantities of the warming remedies and respiratory treatments we'll need for a severe winter. The preservation work was completed successfully despite the shortened timeline, Sister Agnes confirmed the status of their food preparation and distribution systems. Kitchen facilities are organized for winter operations, with preservation work complete and distribution networks ready to function throughout the season. Community members have been trained in the advanced preparation techniques they'll need to maintain nutrition during extended harsh conditions. Sister Beatrice reported on the warming materials and insulation supplies they had created during the intensive preparation period. Textile production exceeded our goals, with sufficient warming garments and insulation materials to supply families throughout the valleys. Building modifications have been completed in all priority households. Sister Rebecca provided updates on the shelter improvements and heating efficiency modifications that had been implemented throughout the communities. All planned building modifications are complete, with heating systems optimized for maximum efficiency. Emergency shelter procedures have been established for families who might face heating failures or fuel shortages. As the senior sisters completed their status review, Sister Meredith felt a familiar mixture of confidence and concern that marked the beginning of each winter season. Their preparations were thorough and their systems were proven, but winter always brought unexpected challenges that tested their adaptability and resourcefulness. "We are as ready as careful preparation can make us," she announced to the assembled sisters. "Now we must demonstrate that our techniques and our community cooperation can meet whatever challenges this winter may present." The first test of their survival systems came sooner than expected. By midday, the snow had accumulated to a depth that made travel between communities difficult and potentially dangerous. Several families from the more isolated settlements had planned to collect final supplies from the sanctuary that morning, but the rapidly deteriorating conditions made such travel impossible. "We must implement the emergency communication protocols immediately," Sister Meredith decided as she watched the heavy snow continue to fall. "All community members must know that they should rely on their household preparations and avoid unnecessary travel until the weather moderates." Sister Catherine and several other sisters who were experienced in mountain travel prepared to carry messages to the communities that could still be reached safely. They dressed in the specially designed cold weather clothing that incorporated the insulation techniques Sister Beatrice had perfected, and they carried sealed containers of warming remedies that could be shared with families who might need immediate assistance. Travel only to settlements that can be reached within 2 hours' walk. Sister Meredith instructed the messengers. Deliver the emergency protocols and assess whether any families need immediate assistance, but do not attempt to return if conditions worsen. The messaging system the healing sisters had developed proved its value during this first crisis. Using pre-arranged signal systems and coded markings, they were able to communicate essential information to communities throughout the valleys despite the travel restrictions imposed by the severe weather. By evening, the The snow had accumulated to unprecedented depths for so early in the season. Community members who had completed their winter preparations found themselves suddenly dependent on the systems they had created, with no opportunity for additional gathering or last-minute improvements. Sister Eleanor and Sister Agnes worked together to coordinate the first implementation of their food distribution networks under actual emergency conditions. Families who had participated in the community resource sharing systems discovered that their advanced planning provided security and confidence that individual preparation could never have achieved. The Miller family in Westford has adequate grain supplies but lacks sufficient preserved vegetables, Sister Catherine reported upon returning from her emergency message run. The Johnson household has surplus preserved foods but requires additional fuel for heating. Both families understand the resource sharing protocols and are prepared to coordinate through the established networks. The knowledge preservation systems they had established ensured that these innovations would not be lost, but would become part of the accumulated wisdom available for future seasons. The educational networks they had created provided mechanisms for sharing improvements rapidly throughout all participating communities. Most importantly, the social cooperation systems they had developed were proving their value in ways that extended beyond immediate survival needs. Communities that had learned to work together effectively for winter survival were discovering that the same collaborative approaches could address other challenges and opportunities throughout the year. The Healing Sisters had created more than just techniques for surviving harsh weather. They had developed comprehensive models for community, organization, and social cooperation that demonstrated the potential for human societies to function more effectively through collaborative effort than through individual competition and accumulation. As they prepared to face the remainder of what promised to be an extended and challenging winter season, Sister Meredith and her colleagues knew that they had already achieved something remarkable. The mountain communities were not just surviving severe conditions, they were thriving in ways that proved the effectiveness of cooperation, innovation, and shared responsibility as foundations for human welfare and social development. The testing season would continue for months ahead, but the early results provided clear evidence that the Healing Sisters had developed survival techniques and social systems that represented significant advances in understanding how communities could organize themselves to ensure the well-being of all their members, even under the most challenging conditions. As January's bitter cold settled over the mountain valleys like a great sleeping beast, the communities that had embraced the Healing Sisters' collaborative survival methods found themselves experiencing a winter unlike any they had known before. Rather than the desperate endurance that had characterized previous harsh seasons, families throughout the region were discovering that thoughtful preparation and community cooperation could transform survival into something approaching comfort. Sister Meredith stood at the frosted windows of the sanctuary, watching the morning light reveal a landscape transformed by weeks of continuous snow and cold. The drifts had grown so deep that many of the familiar landmarks had disappeared entirely, creating a world of gentle white curves and mysterious shadows that bore little resemblance to the green valleys of summer. Yet despite the severity of the weather, smoke rose steadily from chimneys throughout the visible villages, indicating that the heating efficiency improvements were enabling families to maintain warmth without depleting their fuel supplies. The preservation systems were providing adequate nutrition, the warming techniques were protecting health, and the community networks were ensuring that no one faced the challenges alone. Sister Catherine, she called to her young assistant, who was carefully tending the warming fires that kept the sanctuary's herb processing rooms at optimal temperature. Please ask Sister Margaret to join me for our morning assessment. I believe we're ready to begin documenting the advanced techniques that have emerged during these past weeks. The success of their winter survival systems had exceeded even Sister Meredith's optimistic expectations. But she knew that the most valuable learning would come from understanding how and why their approaches were working so effectively. The real wisdom lay not just in the techniques themselves, but in the principles that made those techniques adaptable to different situations and communities. Sister Margaret arrived carrying her carefully maintained records of medical consultations and health outcomes throughout the region. At 72 years of age, she had experienced more harsh winters than any other member of their community, and her perspective on the current season's success was particularly valuable. The health indicators are remarkable, Sister Margaret reported as she settled into a comfortable chair near the warming fire. Respiratory infections are down by more than half compared to previous severe winters. Injuries related to cold and difficult conditions have virtually disappeared. Even the psychological indicators suggest that people are maintaining better mental health despite the extended isolation. She opened her record book to pages filled with careful notations about health patterns throughout the communities. Most significantly, we're seeing evidence that the preventive approaches are working better than we anticipated. People aren't just avoiding serious illness, they're actually maintaining better health than during mild weather seasons, when they rely on traditional individual survival methods. Sister Meredith nodded thoughtfully as she considered the implications of these observations. What do you attribute this success to? Is it primarily the result of better nutrition, improved heating, more effective medicine, or something else? I believe the key factor is the reduction in stress and anxiety that comes from knowing the community support systems are reliable, Sister Margaret replied. When people don't have to worry constantly about whether their individual preparations will be adequate, they can focus their energy on maintaining health rather than simply surviving from day to day. This insight reflected something the healing sisters had suspected, but hadn't fully understood until they observed it in practice. The psychological benefits of community cooperation appeared to be as important as the practical advantages for maintaining health and well-being during difficult conditions. Sister Eleanor joined their morning discussion, bringing reports from the food distribution networks that have been operating continuously throughout the deep winter period. Her systematic approach to resource management provided crucial data about how their community sharing systems were performing under actual survival conditions. The resource sharing networks are functioning more smoothly than individual household management ever could, Sister Eleanor reported. Families are maintaining better nutrition with greater variety, using less total resources than previous winter seasons required. The preservation techniques are providing foods that people actually prefer to the limited options available through traditional methods. She showed them detailed records of food distribution patterns that revealed how community cooperation was creating efficiency gains that benefited everyone involved. By pooling resources and sharing specialized preservation techniques, communities are achieving food security that would be impossible for individual households with the same total resources. The evidence suggested that their collaborative approaches were generating what later economic thinking would recognize as system-wide efficiency gains that created more total welfare than competitive individual approaches could achieve. Sister Agnes joined their discussion to share observations about how the intensive community cooperation was affecting social relationships and community dynamics. Her role in organizing shared meals and community gatherings gave her unique insights into the social dimensions of their survival systems. The cooperation required for winter survival is strengthening community bonds in ways that extend far beyond resource sharing, Sister Agnes observed. Families that had little contact during normal seasons are developing lasting friendships. Young people are learning skills from elders they had never had reason to work with previously. Neighbors are discovering shared interests and mutual respect that create social capital for addressing future challenges. These Social benefits were emerging as unexpected, but crucial advantages of the collaborative survival approaches. Communities weren't just surviving winter more effectively, they were becoming stronger and more cohesive in ways that would benefit them throughout the year. Sister Beatrice arrived to contribute her perspectives on how the warming textile techniques were performing and evolving through practical use. Her expertise in the comfort crafts had expanded considerably as community members discovered new applications and improvements for the basic methods they had been taught. People are adapting the layering techniques and insulation methods in ways we never anticipated, Sister Beatrice reported. They're applying the principles to protect livestock, preserve equipment, and even create comfortable outdoor workspaces that enable continued activity during severe weather. She described innovative applications that demonstrated how understanding the principles behind their techniques enable people to create solutions for problems the Healing Sisters had never considered. The Thompson family in Oakenhard has used insulation techniques to create a warm workshop space where they can continue their woodworking throughout winter. The Martinez household in Thornbridge has adapted the layering methods to keep their milk cows comfortable, which maintains food production that would normally stop during harsh weather. These creative adaptations revealed something important about their educational approach. By teaching principles rather than just specific techniques, they had enabled community members to innovate solutions that extended the effectiveness of their survival systems far beyond the original applications. As the sisters and novices began to disperse to begin their preparations, Sister Meredith remained in the hall for a few moments to contemplate the magnitude of the task ahead. The survival of hundreds of people throughout the mountain valleys would depend on how effectively they could implement their accumulated wisdom during the crucial weeks ahead. But she also felt a deep sense of purpose and satisfaction in the work they were about to undertake. The Healing Sisters had devoted their lives to preserving knowledge, serving others, and demonstrating that communities could thrive even under the most challenging conditions when they worked together with wisdom, determination, and mutual support. The techniques they had developed were not just methods for surviving harsh winters. They were proof that innovation and leadership could emerge from unexpected sources when people were given opportunities to collaborate in addressing shared challenges. Their example showed that marginalized communities often develop the most creative and effective solutions precisely because they face the greatest difficulties with the fewest conventional resources. As Sister Meredith finally left the hall to begin her own preparations for the winter ahead, she carried with her both the weight of responsibility and the quiet confidence that came from years of successful experience. The Healing Sisters were ready to face another test of their accumulated wisdom and organizational skills, armed with decades of practical knowledge and the unshakable determination to protect and serve the communities that depended on their expertise. The days following the morning assembly brought a transformation to the sanctuary of St. Bridget as the Healing Sisters implemented their comprehensive winter survival plan. The peaceful rhythm of normal life gave way to a carefully orchestrated symphony of preparation activities that touched every corner of the sanctuary and extended throughout the mountain valleys. Sister Margaret began each day before dawn in the herb gardens, working by candlelight to harvest the most delicate medicinal plants before the morning frost could damage their therapeutic properties. Her experienced hands moved quickly but carefully among the rows of carefully tended plants, selecting roots, leaves, and flowers at the precise moment when their healing compounds were at peak concentration. Sister Catherine, she called softly to her young assistant as the first gray light of dawn began to creep across the garden. "We must gather all of the feverfew this morning. The leaves are showing the subtle color changes that indicate the plants are beginning their autumn dormancy, and we cannot wait another day if we wish to preserve their potency." Sister Catherine hurried to join her mentor among the rows of aromatic plants, her basket ready to receive the precious harvest. The morning air was crisp and still, carrying the scents of earth, herbs, and the distant wood smoke from chimneys in the villages below. As they worked together in the growing light, Sister Margaret shared the knowledge that had been passed down through generations of healing sisters. Notice the way the morning dew clings to these particular leaves, Sister Margaret explained, her voice soft but clear in the quiet garden. This tells us that the plant's moisture content is optimal for the drying process we'll use to preserve their medicinal properties. If we waited until the dew had evaporated, the leaves would have lost some of their essential oils. They worked systematically through the garden, harvesting different varieties of plants according to the specific timing requirements Sister Margaret had learned through decades of careful observation. Each type of herb required different handling techniques to preserve its therapeutic value, and each had to be processed using methods that had been refined through years of experimentation. As the sun climbed higher, other sisters joined them in the gardens. Sister Patricia gathered roots that needed to be cleaned and dried before the ground froze. Sister Diana collected seeds that would provide both food and medicine during the winter months. Sister Rebecca harvested the fibrous plants that would be used to create insulation materials and warming textiles. By mid-morning, the sanctuary's herb processing rooms were filled with the organized activity of preservation work. Long wooden tables were covered with carefully sorted plants in various stages of preparation. Sister Margaret moved between different workstations, offering guidance and ensuring that each variety of herb was being processed correctly. These willow bark strips must be dried slowly to preserve their pain-relieving properties, she explained to a group of novices who were learning the intricate techniques. Too much heat will destroy the compounds we need, but insufficient drying will allow spoilage that makes the medicine useless. In another area of the processing rooms, Sister Agnes supervised the preparation of warming remedies that would be distributed throughout the communities. Large copper pots simmered gently over carefully tended fires, filling the air with the rich aromas of ginger, cinnamon, and other warming spices. The novices worked under her careful guidance, learning to combine ingredients in precise proportions that would provide maximum therapeutic benefit. The secret to these warming tonics, Sister Agnes explained to Sister Catherine as they stirred a large batch of honey-sweetened ginger preparation, lies not just in the individual ingredients, but in understanding how they work together to create sustained internal warmth. The honey provides immediate energy, the ginger stimulates circulation, and the cinnamon helps the body maintain its natural heating processes. She demonstrated the proper technique for testing the consistency and potency of the mixture. When the preparation reaches this golden amber color and flows like thick cream from the stirring spoon, we know it has achieved the proper concentration. Too thin, and it won't provide lasting warmth. Too thick, and it becomes difficult for people to consume when they're already chilled. Meanwhile, in the sanctuary's extensive kitchens, Sister Eleanor coordinated the accelerated food preservation efforts that would ensure adequate nutrition for the extended winter ahead. The normal autumn preservation work had been compressed into an intensive 3-week period that required all available hands and innovative approaches to traditional methods. We're implementing the advanced fermentation techniques we developed 2 years ago, Sister Eleanor explained to a group of village women who had come to help with the preservation work. These methods not only preserve food for longer periods, but actually improve its nutritional value by creating vitamins that help prevent winter illness. Large wooden vats lined one wall of the kitchen, each containing different vegetables at various stages of the fermentation process. Sister Eleanor moved between them, checking the progress of each batch and adjusting the conditions to ensure optimal preservation. The art of fermentation required precise timing, temperature control, and an understanding of the complex processes that transform fresh foods into preserved nutrients. This batch of cabbage and root vegetables will be ready for storage in another week, she said, lifting the wooden lid to reveal vegetables in their characteristic preservation brine. The fermentation creates beneficial bacteria that help maintain digestive health during winter months when fresh foods are unavailable. It also produces acids that prevent spoilage and preserve the vegetable's vitamin content. Sister Beatrice had transformed the sanctuary's sewing and crafting rooms into production centers for the warming textiles and insulation materials that would be essential for community survival. Tables that normally held small mending projects now overflowed with fabric, wool batting, and the various materials used to create their innovative insulation systems. The layering technique we use creates air pockets that trap body heat more effectively than single thick fabrics. Sister Beatrice explained to a circle of women who were learning to create the specialized garments. Each layer serves a different function. The inner layer wicks moisture away from the skin, the middle layer provides insulation, and the outer layer protects against wind and water, she demonstrated. The precise stitching patterns that held the layers together while maintaining their insulating properties. These quilting stitches must be close enough to prevent the batting from shifting, but not so tight that they compress the insulating material. The air spaces between the fibers are what provide the warmth. Young mothers worked alongside experienced crafters, learning techniques they could use to protect their families during the harsh months ahead. Children played quietly nearby, their presence adding warmth and purpose to the serious work being undertaken by their mothers and grandmothers. Sister Rebecca led teams of volunteers throughout the valleys, visiting every household to implement the building modifications that would improve heating efficiency and weather protection. Her practical knowledge of construction and her understanding of heat flow patterns enabled her to identify improvements that could dramatically reduce fuel requirements while increasing comfort. Most families don't realize how much heat they lose through small gaps and poorly sealed openings, she explained to a group of village men as they worked to improve a typical mountain cottage. These modifications may seem minor, but together they can reduce heating fuel requirements by half while making the home much more comfortable. In the rolling hills of the northern valleys, where the mist clung to ancient oak trees like whispered prayers, there lived a community of women known throughout the land as the Healing Sisters. These remarkable women, led by the wise Sister Meredith, had devoted their lives to tending the sick, preserving ancient knowledge, and ensuring that their mountain communities survived even the harshest of winters. The year was 1312, and autumn's golden leaves were beginning their gentle dance toward the earth. Sister Meredith stood at the tall windows of the sanctuary of St. Bridget, watching as the first frost painted delicate silver patterns across the herb gardens that surrounded their home. The sanctuary was built of gray stone, its walls thick enough to withstand the fierce mountain winds, and its halls warm enough to shelter dozens of women who had chosen this life of service at 43 years of age. Sister Meredith had weathered 25 winters in these mountains. Her graying brown hair was always neatly braided and covered with a simple white veil, and her green eyes held the calm wisdom of someone who had learned to read the subtle signs that nature provided to those who knew how to listen. This morning, she noticed something in the way the frost had formed, something in the particular stillness of the air, that told her this winter would be one of the most challenging they had ever faced. Sister Catherine, she called softly to a younger woman who was carefully grinding dried herbs at a wooden table near the window. Please ask Sister Margaret and Sister Eleanor to join us here. I believe we need to begin our winter preparations earlier than usual this year. Sister Catherine looked up from her work, her young face showing the questioning expression of someone who had lived through only 3 winters in the mountains. Her auburn hair caught the morning light as she nodded respectfully. Of course, Sister Meredith. Shall I also summon Sister Agnes from the kitchens? Yes, child. And ask Sister Beatrice to come as well. If my observations are correct, we will need to gather the wisdom of all our most experienced sisters to prepare for what lies ahead. As Sister Catherine hurried away, her soft leather shoes making barely a whisper on the smooth stone floors, Sister Meredith turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see the village of Millbrook nestled in the valley below, its thatched roofs already beginning to show the white traces of frost. Smoke was rising from several chimneys, creating thin gray ribbons against the pale morning sky. The sight brought both comfort and concern to her heart, for she knew that the villagers would depend heavily on the healing sisters during the difficult months ahead. The sanctuary of St. Bridget had been established nearly 60 years earlier by Sister Meredith's predecessor, the legendary Sister Agatha, who had recognized that these remote mountain communities needed more than occasional visits from traveling physicians. The winters here were long and harsh, often lasting from October through April, and the nearest town with a proper physician was 3 days' journey away when the weather was good. When snow blocked the mountain passes, that journey became impossible for months at a time. Sister Agatha had understood that survival in these conditions required more than just medical knowledge. It demanded careful planning, community cooperation, and the kind of practical wisdom that could only be gained through years of experience. She had established the sanctuary not just as a place of healing, but as a center for preserving and sharing the knowledge that would keep entire communities alive through the darkest months of the year. Now, as Sister Meredith watched the morning frost spread across the landscape, she felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar, well-worn cloak. The healing sisters had developed remarkable techniques for winter survival over the decades, methods that went far beyond simple medical treatment to encompass every aspect of community welfare. During harsh conditions, Sister Margaret was the first to arrive in response to Sister Meredith's summons. At 52 years of age, she was the sanctuary's most experienced herbalist, a woman whose knowledge of plants and their properties seemed almost magical to those who didn't understand the decades of careful study and experimentation that lay behind her skills. Her gray hair was streaked with white, and her hands, though lined with age, moved with the sure precision of someone who had prepared thousands of healing remedies. "You've noticed it too," Sister Margaret said without preamble as she approached the window. It was not a question. After 28 years of working together, the senior sisters had developed an almost intuitive understanding of each other's thoughts and concerns. "The signs are unmistakable," Sister Meredith replied quietly. "The frost patterns, the behavior of the birds yesterday evening, the way the wind has been shifting from the northwest. I believe we're facing what our grandmothers would have called a wolf winter, one that arrives early, stays late, and tests every survival skill we possess." Sister Eleanor joined them next, her tall frame moving with the graceful efficiency that marked all her actions. As the sanctuary's master of food preservation and storage, she had spent the summer months working with the local farming communities to ensure adequate supplies for the winter ahead. Her dark eyes, serious but kind, reflected the methodical nature of her thinking as she listened to Sister Meredith's assessment. "If that's the case," Sister Eleanor said thoughtfully, "we'll need to implement the advanced preservation techniques we've been developing. The standard methods may not be sufficient for an extended winter." Sister Agnes arrived from the kitchens, still carrying the warm sense of baking bread and simmering stews that made the sanctuary's halls feel like a welcoming home even on the coldest days. As the chief cook and manager of the sanctuary's food resources, she had fed not only the sisters themselves, but also countless visitors, refugees, and community members who needed help during difficult times. Her round, cheerful face was flushed from the heat of the kitchen fires, and her practical woolen dress was covered by a sturdy linen apron. "I've been watching our stores," Sister Agnes reported, "and we're in good condition for a normal winter. But if we're to extend our assistance to the surrounding communities, as we've done in previous harsh seasons, we'll need to be more creative with our resource management. Finally, Sister Beatrice appeared, a gentle demeanor marking her as the sanctuary's expert in what they've called comfort crafts, the techniques for maintaining warmth, creating insulation, and managing the practical details of daily life during extreme cold. At 38, she had spent nearly 2 decades perfecting methods for keeping people warm and comfortable with minimal resources. Her nimble fingers could transform scraps of wool and fabric into garments that provided remarkable protection against the cold. When all 5 senior sisters had gathered around the tall window, Sister Meredith began to share her observations and concerns. "I believe we're facing a winter that will test every technique we've developed over the years. The frost patterns this morning suggest that cold weather will arrive at least 3 weeks earlier than usual. The birds have been gathering in formations I haven't seen since the terrible winter of 1303. The wind patterns indicate that storm systems will be both more frequent and more severe than in recent years." She paused, allowing her words to settle in the quiet morning air. Around them, the sanctuary was beginning to stir with the gentle sounds of the day's activities. Young novices could be heard in the distance, beginning their morning prayers and preparing for their daily lessons in healing arts. The soft sounds of normal life provided a peaceful counterpoint to the serious discussion taking place among the senior sisters. "If my assessment is correct," Sister Meredith continued, "we have perhaps 4 weeks to complete preparations that would normally take us 6 to 8 weeks. We'll need to accelerate every aspect of our winter planning, and we'll need to coordinate more closely than ever with the communities throughout the valleys." Sister Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "The herb gardens are still producing well, but we'll need to harvest everything within the next 2 weeks and begin the intensive preservation processes immediately. Some of our more delicate medicines require specific timing, and if harsh weather arrives early, we could lose access to crucial plants. The food situation is manageable," Sister Eleanor added, "but we'll need to implement the community sharing networks earlier than planned. If we're to help our neighbors through an extended difficult period, we'll need to begin organizing the resource pooling arrangements immediately." Sister Agnes shifted her weight slightly, her practical mind already working through the implications. "The kitchen facilities can handle increased preservation work, but we'll need additional help from the novices and perhaps some of the village women. The advanced preservation techniques require more hands and more time than our normal methods." As the sisters gathered in the main hall for their morning assembly, Sister Meredith began to share the knowledge that would guide their preparations for the challenging winter ahead. The morning light streaming through the tall windows created a sense of peaceful urgency as the women settled onto the wooden benches, their faces reflecting both concern and determination. "My dear sisters," Sister Meredith began, her voice carrying easily through the stone hall, "we are about to face a test that will require us to use every technique our predecessors developed and every innovation we have created during our years together. The signs all point to what our foundress, Sister Agatha, would have called a season of testing, a winter that will demand the very best of our knowledge and cooperation." Sister Margaret rose from her seat near the front of the hall. As the senior herbalist, she would begin their review of the survival techniques by explaining the botanical knowledge that formed the foundation of their winter preparations. Her weathered hands moved gracefully as she spoke, illustrating points with gestures that reflected decades of working with plants and healing remedies. "The first of our survival methods," Sister Margaret explained, "centers on what we call a healing warmth approach. While wealthy households in the cities rely on expensive firewood and imported charcoal to heat their chambers, we have learned to create warming systems that are far more efficient and sustainable." She moved to a wooden table where several clay pots contained different types of dried plants and prepared materials. We begin with herbs that generate internal warmth when consumed as teas or added to food. Ginger root, when properly prepared, can raise body temperature from within and maintain that warmth for hours. Cinnamon bark, ground and mixed with honey, creates a warming paste that can prevent the deep chill that leads to serious illness. Young Sister Catherine raised her hand tentatively. Sister Margaret, how do we ensure sufficient supplies of these warming herbs when they must be imported from warmer regions? Sister Margaret smiled at the thoughtful question. This brings us to one of our most important innovations, child. We have developed relationships with monastery communities throughout the region, creating what we call knowledge trading networks. We share our expertise in treating winter ailments and preserving food in exchange for access to herbs and materials that don't grow in our mountain climate. She lifted a small wooden box filled with aromatic dried roots. Last spring, Sister Eleanor and I traveled to the Abbey of St. Benedict, 3 days south of here, where they maintain extensive herb gardens. We taught their infirmary sisters our techniques for treating respiratory infections and frostbite injuries. In return, they provided us with sufficient warming herbs to last through even an extended harsh season. Sister Eleanor stood to continue the explanation. As the sanctuary's expert in food preservation and resource management, she understood better than anyone how their survival techniques depended on careful planning and community cooperation that began months before winter arrived. The second method we employ is what we call community resource weaving. Sister Eleanor explained. Rather than each household attempting to store sufficient supplies individually, we coordinate throughout the valleys to ensure that essential resources are distributed where they will be most effective. She moved to a large wooden cabinet and opened it to reveal shelves lined with various containers and packages. During the summer months, we work with farming families to identify households that have surplus grain, families that have extra preserved meat, and communities that have abundant supplies of particular materials. We then organize exchange systems that ensure everyone has access to the variety of foods and supplies needed for winter health. Sister Agnes joined the explanation from her position near the back of the hall. The preservation techniques we use are more advanced than anything practiced by individual households, she added. By pooling resources and working together, we can implement fermentation processes, smoking techniques, and storage methods that require specialized knowledge and equipment. She gestured toward the corridor that led to the sanctuary's extensive kitchens and storage areas. Our root cellars maintain the precise temperature and humidity conditions needed for long-term food storage. Our smoking chambers can preserve meat for months while actually improving its nutritional value. Our fermentation systems create preserved foods that provide essential nutrients. During winter months, when fresh sources are unavailable, Sister Beatrice rose to address the third major survival method. Her expertise in what they called warmth crafts had enabled the sanctuary to keep people comfortable and healthy even during the most severe weather conditions. Her gentle voice carried clearly through the hall as she explained techniques that had taken years to develop and perfect. The third approach focuses on what we call adaptive insulation, Sister Beatrice said. Rather than relying on expensive woolen garments that most families cannot afford, we have learned to create effective insulation using materials that are readily available even to the poorest households. She held up examples of clothing items that appeared simple but incorporated sophisticated insulation techniques. These outer garments may look ordinary, but they contain multiple layers of different materials that trap air and body heat more effectively than single thick fabrics. We use wool batting, plant fibers, and even treated goose down in combinations that provide maximum warmth with minimum weight. Sister Diana, one of the younger sisters who had shown particular aptitude for the warming crafts, stood to demonstrate some of the techniques. We also modify existing clothing by adding hidden insulation layers that don't change the garment's appearance but dramatically improve its warming properties, she explained. A simple woolen dress can be transformed into effective winter protection by adding thin layers of insulating material to the lining. Sister Meredith nodded approvingly as each explanation built upon the previous ones, creating a comprehensive picture of how their survival methods work together as an integrated system. The fourth technique we employ is what we call shelter transformation, she continued. Most of the homes in our mountain communities were built for summer comfort rather than winter survival. We help families modify their living spaces to create maximum warmth and protection with minimal additional resources. Sister Rebecca, who had developed expertise in building modification and heating efficiency, stepped forward to explain these techniques. Her practical knowledge came from years of helping families throughout the valleys prepare their homes for harsh weather conditions. We begin by teaching families to identify the sources of heat loss in their homes, Sister Rebecca explained. Most people don't realize how much warmth escapes through gaps around windows and doors, or how much cold air enters through poorly sealed spaces. Simple modifications using clay, fabric, and plant materials can dramatically improve a home's ability to retain heat. She pointed to a detailed drawing on a wooden board that showed a typical mountain cottage with various modifications, marked in different colors. We also teach techniques for redirecting heat from cooking fires to warm sleeping areas more effectively. By hanging heavy cloth panels and rearranging furniture, families can create smaller, more easily heated spaces within larger cold rooms. Young Sister Patricia raised her hand with another question. Sister Rebecca, what about families who don't have sufficient fuel for heating fires throughout the winter? This brings us to our fifth method, Sister Rebecca replied. We call it cooperative heating, and it's one of our most effective innovations. Instead of each family attempting to heat their home independently, we organize neighborhood arrangements where families share heating resources and rotate between different locations based on daily heating schedules. Sister Agnes added to this explanation from her experience managing resources at the sanctuary. We also teach families to prepare heating materials that burn more efficiently than ordinary firewood. Compressed plant materials, treated wood scraps, and even certain types of prepared animal waste can provide more heat with less fuel than traditional heating sources. Sister Meredith continued with the explanation of their sixth survival method. The approach we call information networking may be the most crucial of all our techniques, she said. Knowledge about weather patterns, resource availability, and community needs must flow quickly throughout the valleys to enable effective preparation and response. Sister Catherine, who often served as a messenger between communities, stood to explain how these communication systems worked. We maintain contact with communities throughout the region using a network of trusted messengers who travel regularly between villages and settlements. Each community has designated individuals who gather and share information about local conditions, resource supplies, and assistance needs. She gestured toward a wooden shelf lined with small packages and sealed containers. We use coded messages and signal systems that allow us to communicate important information quickly across long distances. A particular arrangement of cloth strips on a tree branch can indicate weather warnings to travelers. Specific